Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Nice to see you all here. Welcome to day one. We're going to try and make sure the set doesn't fall down in this session. You can see it's been nicely fixed in the meantime. So I'm really delighted to have you all here to discuss Industry, which is one of my favourite shows. It launched in 2020 during the pandemic, and season 2 really grew in sort of confidence and ambition and scope. And season 3 has just launched on HBO in the States and is due to arrive here later in the year. But before we're joined by our brilliant panel, I thought it'd be good to just have a bit of a recap of season 1 and 2 so we can all relocate ourselves in the conversation. So do join me in having a look at this recap video. Please join me in welcoming to the stage executive producer Jane Tranter, showrunners Mickey Down and Konrad Kay, and Sagar Radia, who plays Rishi in the show. Welcome, guys.
Hello.
So we're going to have a chat amongst ourselves, and then there'll be time for audience questions, which I'm sure you'll have. I'm sure you're all old hands at this now, but obviously you submit your questions via the app, and I will get them through the magic of technology on my screen here. So let's start talking about the origins of the show. Let's go back to the beginning. Jane, can you talk a little bit about how you and Mickey and Konrad first started working together?
So it was a long time ago now. Mm-hmm. 8 years.
Yes.
Yeah. 8 years, 3 seasons. So no one said TV was quick. So this is a really good demonstration, I think, of how there is no such thing in drama as a good idea. There's only the good execution of the idea. So I had been thinking for a while that Bad Wolf should do something set in the world of finance, which is partly because there are all these old adages sometimes that, or you can't make a television drama about this subject or that subject, and you can't until somebody does. No sport until Friday Night Lights, and no finance until, Industry, Succession, Billions, and then suddenly there's a load of it. But I was really interested about, unlike Eric, I am not terrified of the young. And nor do I want to control them. In fact, I just want them to get on with it, and I will build myself on their shoulders. That seems good for me. But I wanted to do something about the generation that had lived through the 2008 crash and still wanted to go and work in the city. I just couldn't work out how come people were still interested in doing this. I thought they must be absolute fuckwads. And I was trying to work out, and we looked at various newspaper articles and looked at a true life story of an intern who died while interning for an American bank in London. And I was just sort of floundering around. And then Ryan Rasmussen, someone who works for Bad Wolf, met Mickey and Konrad actually to talk about a film. Mm-hmm. Not very good film, if I'm honest. And Ryan came and said, I met these writers, I think they're amazing, and don't think this film idea is going to work. It was our idea, not their idea. Their ideas would have been brilliant. And I think you should meet them because they used to work in the city. And I was like, bring them in. I don't need to read them. I just think, that authenticity of experience is what we need. And they came in and they sat down, and I said, I've got this idea. And they went, yeah, this is the thing that we want to write, and we've been wanting to write it for ages. And I was, okay, let's go. And then about 2 years later, we finally got a green light, and we worked on it intensively for 365 days a year for 2 years. So there is it's not all good luck charm. There's an awful lot of hard work and talent that goes into it. But that's how it happened. They were the fuckwads who worked for the bank.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say, that was a great introduction. I remember Jane saying, this is a really great piece and it's on the fast track. I remember me and Konrad thinking that meant maybe 2 or 3 months rather than the 3 years that it took to get it on there. But which actually felt, we had to, 3 years actually was a perfect amount of time for us to discover how to write a TV show. And I would say that we're still trying to discover that.
To your credit, Jane, I think you did a very smart thing of incubating us and making us feel like the next draft would be the one that would really unlock something, when in fact, we wrote 85 drafts of that first script. And actually, if you go back and watch season 1, episodes 1 and 2, you can really tell were written in isolation, and they went through multiple drafts. Not to say that they're particularly good compared to the rest of the season, but they feel slightly detached from the rest of the story. And then when HBO greenlit the show, we could actually write 3, 4, and we could actually map the whole season out. 1 and 2 felt very much like their own thing. But I mean, it was a very iterative process. Like the cut, even when we made the first season of the show, Lena's first episode went through multiple cuts as well, and we're just trying to find the tone of the show. Every episode did, yeah.
So we're trying to figure out actually what the tone was going to be.
Yeah.
And the tone, I think, has evolved throughout the seasons, but at that point it was about, I think what I lighted on, what we were interested in was writing a show about ambitious young people, because at that time there was a lot of shows about young people. There were a few slice of life London shows, but not really anything where the people wanted to do stuff, get off the sofa. So yeah, that was kind of what we wanted, and it was, season 1 is a reflection of that. It feels like it's predominantly about going into your first job.
And in terms of sort of the kind of industry appetite for a show like that, as in the TV industry, to what extent did it feel like a risk that you were taking, Jane, but that HBO were taking?
At the time, I was really confident about it, because we were in a really lucky position. I'd just come back from working in LA for a period of time. I had worked very closely with HBO. HBO had a very small investment in Bad Wolf. We were kind of, in the words of Tony Soprano, family. And they said, could you just make us something for this low cost and do whatever you want? And I said, well, I think if we do that, let's do it with new talent. And they went, absolutely, this is a brilliant thing to do. And then I told them what it was we wanted to do, and they were kind of like, yeah, just go for it. And only over time, once they met Mickey and Konrad, because they were kind of go for it, you can do that new talent thing in the corner over there. And then they met Mickey and Konrad, and they began to realise what the show was, and the whole thing grew. But I think it was, at the time, it was an organic development. I think in 2024, when I look at it, I think how precious a thing it was. I kind of took it for granted. And actually, you can never take anything for granted, ever, if you get a television drama commission. They're precious and hard won. They're the stuff of dreams. But particularly now, it is so much harder because so much less is being done on both sides of the Atlantic, and it's so much harder to get work by new voices done.
And what a luxury to be able to develop those new voices on a show.
Yes. Yeah, that is a very good point. And we did have time to do it. I mean, I still remember the very first draft that Mickey and Konrad sent in, which they would say is a C- and be quite disparaging. And it wasn't right at all. It was like a sort of flat line, like, one of those heart monitors that had gone on a flat line. But it had the most distinctive voice and authenticity and strong visceral tonality to it. And I've never had a piece of work come in from writers who'd never written for television before that was as strong as that. It doesn't matter that it wasn't right. You could just see that actually they were, and I think I said to HBO then, I said, give us 3 years and they will be the best showrunners you have. Actually, it's 8 years, I believe.
It's not bad.
So
it was too authentic.
Fast.
It was too authentic. It was us basically, having worked in that business and now being commissioned by HBO to make a show about the business, we said we have to render this as authentically as possible, to the point where it felt like real life. It was almost documentarian. It was a reflection of what mine and Konrad's experiences in banking was like, which is like monotony, very small, minutiae drama.
We just didn't think about the fact that we were making a TV show.
But it was so bold. That was the thing. Because you weren't thinking about it, and because you had the authenticity, for sure, of lived experience, but you also had the voice, the writing voice that you continued to develop. So that it wasn't right didn't matter, because you could have done something that was much more polished and had a much more televisual narrative to it, which you went on to find. That can be helped. That voice thing cannot be.
No.
Makes sense.
I think being allowed, I mean, you said the immense privilege being able to develop as writers in 3 years, which is the length of an undergraduate degree, whilst actually on a show. I think it's very
once in
rare.
a lifetime sort of thing. And HBO to allow us to keep coming on and because I mean, whatever you want to say about the first season versus the third season, there is a development of style and voice across those 3 things. And a function of that is our confidence in what we're doing a little bit, and in terms of confidence in the actors, you can actually see he's a great example of someone who, we wrote as a peripheral character, kind of fell in love with his voice through writing ADR, supplementary comedic ADR for him, and because it was like me and Mickey writing with the stabilizers off. Season 1, we were both naive and arrogant, which is quite a toxic combination. But also we were a little bit stymied by the fact that we were doing it for the first time, and then we started writing this ADR where we were just a bit more free flowing, a little bit more, not second guessing ourselves as much, basically. And then, you wouldn't mind me saying this, it's not that you weren't great in season 1, but like you came onto the set on season 2 and you carried yourself very differently. It was like, you'd said to me privately, you were like, I took, maybe this is not a good thing, but I took a little bit of Rishi into my sense of, self-worth and confidence. Nice. And then what happens is we just, suddenly you're like, wow, we have this like powerhouse combination of actor and character, and but the long-winded way of saying that HBO, like, to give us 3 seasons to do that is a kind of incubation. It's a kind of, it was an investment, really.
Absolutely. And Sagar, talk a little bit about the way you sort of developing that character, because as you say, it was so interesting going back and rewatching season 1 over the last couple of weeks, and you just see you just popping up in the background every now and then, and knowing sort of what that character develops into.
I think the interesting thing is I was learning about Rishi at the rate everybody else was learning about Rishi. So I would get season 2 and I'm learning more because obviously they're giving me more to do, and I'm going, oh, okay, cool, that's really interesting. And you get to season 3 and obviously there's this episode, and I'm learning about his home life and his, being a husband and being a father and all these different aspects to him. So in a really weird way, it was just my way of doing the work, just through each season coming without overthinking it too much. And in season 1, it's tough, for anyone here who's, starting at the beginning of something, you don't quite know what to do with it, or what's too much or what's too little. And for me, it was just trying to be authentic with it and not try and do too much, because the last thing you want to do is overact it, and then you feel like you're trying to be like, look at me, look at me. So you just play it as authentically as possible, and if it gets picked up, it gets picked up. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And it was just one of those things.
Mm-mm. And you've all mentioned tone a little bit, and it's such a tricky thing to get right, and particularly a show like this where it can be quite, it can be quite cynical, it can be quite dark. You go into some difficult territory, but you do it with absolute conviction and authenticity. And there's a version of the show, I imagine, that sort of goes to some of those places that's sort of a bit unwatchable because it just feels so bleak. But you always balance that really, really well. Can you talk a little bit about finding that delicate balance and how you've developed that?
It's a really good question. I mean, going back to the first ever draft we did, the documentarian super authentic version, it just was soulless and lifeless, and it didn't have any of the humour that the show, I think, came to view as one of its best strong points.
Definitely.
There was a note from one of the executives at HBO was, you're writing the characters as if they're in their third act, because me and Konrad had been spat out by the industry, so we had this sort of, it was a cathartic exercise writing the show, but it also was like us being a bit like fuck you to it, and not really remembering what actually drives you into it in the first place, which is crucial if you're writing a show about people going into something who want to go into it. So that's when we kind of we made it slightly more, I don't want to say joyous, but a bit more, I don't know, as if there was some kind of willing from the characters to go into it. And then I think one of the things that Jane said, which she kept saying, which is actually really important, actually I think we really listened to in the 3rd season, was the show should not be, after 8 years, the show should not be self-serious. There's a very difference between being serious and taking yourself too seriously. And in season 1, I think the show is successful because it's kind of punky, and it's obviously a reflection of being young in London, and yes, they're ambitious, and yes, traumatic stuff happens, but it's all through the lens of being a go-getter and trying to strive and, trying to make a success of yourself. Whereas I actually think in season 2, we kind of overcorrected a little bit, and there were scenes there were storylines which we felt that we had to do because they were made good on promises we had made in the 1st season, but felt a little bit too self-serious. And I think that was honestly a reflection of writing during COVID and writing about COVID, and just everything felt a little bit more grey and a little bit more dour. And in season 3, we thought, okay, the best stuff about season 2 was, for our mind, the story structure, the rigid plotting, the fact there was stuff that was actual plotted rather
For
than
sure.
but then we wanted to get some of the sort of soulfulness and fun and playfulness.
Spontaneity
of the first season.
Weird, like we lost some of the weirdness in season 2. Like,
Definitely.
but it was about, if maybe to take your analogy, it's like if the first album was like a punk record, the first season, then we were like, we got into the studio and it was like, we suddenly had a really big producer and we formalized it too much. 3 was like, we can still do the slightly weird, esoteric, Kit Harrington piss play stuff, but within the superstructure of like a proper season of TV.
But I think this is interesting because it's an interesting thing about finding the tone of industry, that I think that you found it as executive producers before you found it as writers. So yes, we got those scripts. The scripts became better and better and better, and then we got into the edit and discovered that some of the bits of the scripts weren't landing as strongly as we'd hoped for whatever reason. And you guys then, we all worked and worked and worked. We took the length, this is what, because they were taking responsibility for it all. So we took it from hour episodes to 45-minute episodes. And in so doing, that really defined the crunching tone of the show. And then Mickey and Konrad did the music. All of the music. You guys, worked on time and again. They worked on the grade, the ADR, that layering in of the ADR. And so the tone of the show was found. That thing where if you're very serious, sometimes Mickey and Konrad will do something not very serious within something very serious. Or if you're being very funny, they might do something serious within the funny, if you see what I mean. And that gradually came about in the edit, and I think it came about because they had their hands in it in a way that if they had been just writers, as many new writers are, they wouldn't have been part of that process in the same way, and we wouldn't have got to where we got to, I think.
Yeah, 100%.
What was really great is they allowed the actors to do that a little bit as well. So on set, there was an amazing freedom that we had. Of course, you stay within the boundaries of a structure of a scene, and it's also very difficult to improvise finance, so I wouldn't recommend that to anyone. But what was really helpful is we would improv at the top and the tail of the scenes, and then they would use some, not use some, and find a way to mix in. But actually, I don't want to embarrass Jane about this, but in season 1, we did our first read-through, and Jane did this like Spartan-like speech to us all, and just saying to us like, guys, take risks. If it fails, just go out there and do it. And actually, I know I remember that. I can't speak for the others, but it just frees you up massively to go, you know what? Let's turn up on set, let's try some stuff. It doesn't work.
And tone is
If
such...
it doesn't work, we'll cut it in the edit.
We'll cut it in the edit, yeah. We'll cut around you, Sagar, don't worry
It
about
still feels a little bit like that. Making
does,
it feels like that. We were on another panel, Marisa, who plays Yasmin, was saying, like, obviously, a lot of the actors have gone and done other things, and they all have come back to industry, especially in season 3, and thought, God, it feels like coming back to a family, but also like it's a place where, as a young actor, you're allowed to take risks, and we have very, very rigid scenes, as Sagar said, but like we love actors trying to take risks, trying to do something different, and discovering it on the day. And
confidence in the actors is actually gives us confidence in the writing, because what we're talking about really with tone across all of our favourite shows, and as seasons of industry have gone by, is a kind of tragi-comic thing. Like, the show can never be too funny. That's what we've kind of learned. So like, we've tried to make the show more humorous. It's more of a natural thing for us, but actually it's the ability of people like Marisa and Mahala especially, but everyone on the cast, to basically find the darkness and the light constantly in the scene. Like, we would write things for Marisa in this season. We were like, she has to do a million emotions across this episode. But like, in season 1, we would have seen that we don't know this actress well enough. In season 3, we're like, of course we can heap all this onto her because she's going to knock it out of the park.
Sagar's the same.
Exactly.
Sagar's episode 4 of season 3 is phenomenal standout episode, bottle episode in some respects, but it's like a perfect encapsulation of that. It's a super traumatic, really intense story, but it's constantly funny, constantly really blackly comic, and that's because Sagar is able. We have the confidence of Sagar to be able to deliver that kind of turning on the dime thing.
It comes from, and again, just from an actor's perspective, I don't know if you guys realise this, but some of the things you guys do and act with us on set makes a big difference. There's this one scene, again, I don't know if Konrad remembers this. We were on the trading floor doing a big sort of 5-pagers we do. And we did a scene, we'd cut, and I think we were doing another one and lighting or whatever. Konrad comes scuttling down the stairs. He comes over to me and he goes, Sagar.
Striding. not
Striding.
Like a colossus.
I'll take scuttling.
There was Posh fell across the set.
Exactly.
But you can hear those stairs.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're badly made.
He comes down and he goes, Sagar, you're nailing it. If I could replace you with any actor in the world right now, I wouldn't. And then he went, I was like, oh, yeah.
That's good.
And I was like, let's roll the fucking camera, guys.
Confidence is so, I mean, it's such a trite thing to say, but like confidence is so important. Like,
I think so.
And I think actually we didn't know what we didn't know in the season 1, and we kind of, as Konrad said, it's kind of punky as a result of that, and it doesn't always work. But in season 2, we did not have the confidence to take risks.
No.
Season 2 is a good season. I'm very proud of it. But season 3 is the season where we thought, okay, we were given the confidence by Jane being like, okay, you've got to a 3rd season. You're obviously doing something right. HBO had a lot of confidence in us. I think we came on the first day being like, you know what, we don't know if we're going to come back for season 4. Let's just throw everything at the wall now. Everything we always wanted to do in this show, let's do it.
We definitely did that.
Let's take a look at the teaser for season 3. I love the Amal Rajan cameo.
He's everywhere.
That's what I'm most looking forward to. So without spoiling anything, because it's not coming back until later in the year, can you tell us when it's coming back?
Yeah, so it's transmitting on HBO now, and we're on episode 2 now, and it's 8 episodes, so I'll leave everyone to work the math out.
You can work that out.
Yeah.
What were you looking to explore in season 3? Were there sort of particular, I mean, obviously there are kind of plot things, but were there sort of big thematic things that you were hoping to sort of really get stuck into in this season?
Yeah, I mean, there was a few different things. We wanted to, firstly, obviously I said before, the show started as a workplace drama about young people entering into a workplace, and by that nature it was very narrow in its viewpoint, and it was very subjective to their experience. You know, we never ever broke away from their experience. There was no scenes in the first season where the grads weren't in those scenes. Season 2 we broke a little bit more, and as the characters accrued a little bit more power and had a bit more responsibility, we felt we could do storylines that had larger stakes than like getting salad orders and going to the gym, which is basically what season 1 was about. And then season 3, as I said before, like we just wanted to broaden the canvas and just throw everything at the wall, but also just like show how finance actually sits within a larger ecosystem of politics, the media, and how it actually works. And through this green energy company IPO going to market, which is the sort of the starting point of the season. So yeah, it was just about like really just building it out and just making it more expansive and just seeing how it will work in a way that we never did in the first 2 seasons.
There's a question from the audience about why you've chosen ESG, so environmental, social, and governance, as the particular focus. Was there a particular reason for that?
I mean, look, the really simple reason is that it's a reflection of a major question of the show, which is like, is it possible to be a good person within this space? The show is constantly asking that. And it's always about a balance between being a human, being empathetic, being vulnerable, being kind, being good to people, versus the bottom line, which is like making money. And are those two things oxymoronic? And that's what ESG is. And the debate around ESG, which is basically a sort of euphemism for ethical investing, is like, is it actually possible to invest in a way that makes the world a better place whilst also making money? And you said the show is very cynical, and like the show tries to present both sides of the argument, but ultimately it has a take on it, which is that it's probably started as a position of altruism, but has actually been corrupted by the players within it.
Yeah, I mean, I love how willing the show is to really sort of dig into those grey areas and the places that feel sort of really morally quite murky. And how, you know, so many of the characters feel quite compromised or sort of facing compromises on their sort of moral compass in so many ways. Did you know where you were heading at the end of season? I mean, you end season 2 on such a cliffhanger. I mean, I'm sure everyone who's here, I'm sure you're fans of the show, you'll know Harper gets fired. Do you have a sense of like what the end game is? Like, do you know where your characters are going, or do you start with sort of a blank slate each time you start a new season?
Our one policy is like, because we don't, by the very nature of renewal and the jeopardy around getting another season and stuff like that, you know, you can never take it for granted. We think that the most satisfying way to tell the story in a serialized version is to make sure that each season feels like it comes to a heavy period. There's something quite energizing. I mean, me and Mickey are big Vince Gilligan fans, and one of the things that he talks about in Breaking Bad in the writers' room, because that show wasn't a success in its early seasons, they were always kind of worrying. He was like, if we burn all of our best ideas and we give the audience a satisfying conclusion, we might even have the challenge of then how do we write our way out of this, which will be even more fun. So like the idea of firing Harper to us was kind of creatively energizing, because suddenly she's outside the bank, suddenly a relationship she has with Eric, which is kind of all these weird things that people are pinning onto it, suddenly it becomes actually adversarial. That excited us. It became like, you know, she could actually be a bit more villainous potentially. I think part of the problem with the first 2 seasons is, as Mickey was saying, it was so hermetically sealed, everybody was in one thing, that the actually pieces on the board weren't in the right position. In season 3, we actually had, like, having Harper outside the bank, having Robert outside the bank with Henry, it just allowed the stories to be more organic and allowed a lot of our characters to share screen time together in a way that they didn't in the first 2 seasons. So when we came into season 3 writers' room, we were like, oh, all of this is up for grabs, but we employed very much the same thing of like, if episode 8 of season 3 was to be the final ever episode of Industry, you could watch it and be satisfied that we told a complete story.
One of the things that you absolutely dread to hear when you're working on scripts is a writer saying, but we'll save that for season 2, or we'll save that for season 3, or even sometimes we'll save that for the final episode. You think, okay, play that card, because if you have ideas this good, there will be no shortage of them. They're not suddenly going to run out. You know, it is that thing of, okay, back yourselves into a corner, because then you will write your way out of it.
You'll see, I mean, if you've watched, maybe nobody in this room has seen any of season 3, but maybe some illegally have, but like, you'll see that the first 3 episodes...
We need to know if you have.
Put your hands up.
We get ourselves to a position, I think, at the end of season 3, episode 3 of season 3, which I think maybe a lot of shows would have saved for the finale, in terms of Harper's reascent to some sort of power. But for us, that was like, it's exactly what Jane said. It's like, if you push that forward, you'd be amazed what it actually does structurally to the rest of the season, because suddenly like a whole possibility of where she might end up in 6 hours' time versus, you know, 2 hours' time is... And I think, to be honest, you know, there's a lot of people written about the show about how it's like designed for people with short attention spans. It's designed for like a TikTok kind of brain. And like me and Mickey have never discussed that, apart from like, I guess the editing style was sort of made in the first season, that kind of speed of editing and Nathan's score and stuff. But like, we feel like that is the most compelling way to... Like, every day we just set out and like, all we care about, people ask us all about the themes of the stuff, what is the show about, the character, we literally start, it has to be entertaining. That's literally all we care about when we're writing.
I also think because we go out linearly on HBO, we have to feel like every episode is a complete story, an episode of TV rather than like a part of a wider season.
Exactly.
I think streaming has basically meant that people can just have filler episodes. Episode 4 can be treading water, and like the worst thing a TV show can do is tread water. So like every episode, like why shouldn't every episode feel like the finale? Or the penultimate episode.
Can you tell us a little bit about, let's dig into your process of writing, like how the two of you write together. I mean, you've mentioned having a room. Do you work together and then open it out to the room? Do you sort of have conversations in the room and then you guys go away and write? How does that work?
Like in between seasons, we have a sort of 30,000-foot view about what we kind of want to write about. So this year it was, it would be interesting if we were actually showing an IPO, like really basic idea.
Can you tell us what an IPO is?
An IPO is an initial public offering, like a company going to market, and like which is, I mean, probably the most legible part of finance.
I'd say so, yeah.
And still no one understands what it is.
If you watch Industry season 3, you will understand more. Yeah.
But that's what I love about it, is I don't know anything about finance, and I'm sort of, I trust that you trust me to not know about finance, but to follow what's going on. And even though I'm like, I don't quite understand this, I'm like, I understand the dramatic stakes.
Yeah, and we were like, okay, so season 2 we wrote about healthcare in a really kind of esoteric way. Season 3 we thought about, let's write something that's slightly more accessible. Even if you don't understand what an energy company does or how it functions, you understand that a house has to be heated. You understand that there might be an energy crisis. People understand that. It's kind of topical. So like we thought, like, let's set it in that world. We wanted to write about startups, and that's that kind of culture through a particularly British lens, like not the sort of Silicon Valley version of it, the version we show in Industry season 3. And then one of the things we were really conscious of is more connectivity between the characters. Season 2, by design, the characters are on sort of individual journeys. They don't really interact that much. They have their own mentors. They're on these tram lines. They all have stories separate from one another. Season 3, we were like, we have to connect these characters because that's where the real drama lies. So me and Konrad, we think about that stuff really broadly. Then it's been different between different seasons. Sometimes we go and write in 2 episodes, just us. Maybe we bring one other writer in and just like bounce ideas, or some executives from Bad Wolf, and we just talk about it kind of broadly. We write the 2 episodes, and then we open up to a wider writer's room, which is, I think, crucial. And that's like 8 to 10 weeks. We sit in the writer's room every day, and then me and Konrad go away and write all the episodes, and maybe like one other writer will write one.
But we're quite also, in terms of story, we're quite like image and moment led. Mm-hmm. So like, we'll often come up with either something that we feel is cinematic. Like the way we started talking about season 3 was literally the first thing we talked about was like, oh, what about, Mickey said to me like, what if someone sucks Eric's wedding ring off his finger? And I was just thinking, fuck, that's so like, it's very weird and sexy, and I don't think I've ever seen it on screen in anything. So it was just like, oh, that's quite cool. And then we thought, okay, he's in a midlife crisis. Why is he in a midlife crisis? And this whole thing unspooled from there. And then equally, like, I mean, there's a couple of big spoilers in the first episode, which I won't spoil, but like, we would think, for episode 1, we'd be like, this has to happen. How do we retroactively tell the story to get us to that position? Mm-hmm. And it kind of, I don't know, that felt very, and then we had a great writer's room on season 3, which was incredibly, like almost too idea generative. So you'll see when you see the episodes, they're incredibly stuffed full of story, but we actually have hewn a huge amount away in the edit of that stuff. We just had a lot of really good material.
And you mentioned wanting to make sure that it's entertaining, and you mentioned story, and it's so sort of, kind of plot heavy, and that's really exciting, but it's so rich thematically as well. And that's one of the things I love about it, is that, obviously it's a show about money, it's about finance, but really it's also a show about power, and it's a show about class. And I love how in every scene, in every storyline, you see those kind of themes playing out. And I wonder sort of how you approach when are you writing sort of plot first, and then you're going back and you're sort of filling in theme, or are you writing theme first? How are you?
I think we feel more confident writing about stuff now, because we do obviously like to write about stuff. I think like first and foremost, the most important thing a television show should be is entertaining. I've been butchering this Michael Eisner quote, by the way, in other interviews, but like he has a quote about the fact that they're obligated, I'm paraphrasing it, but like the obligation should be to entertain. And if you entertain, and in a very good way, your obligation is not to make a statement, and it's not really to be didactic or to say something. But if you make something really entertaining and you do it well, like inevitably sometimes you're going to make a statement, you're going to say something. And me and Konrad were like, entertainment is the most important thing. But like, we're writing about contemporary life. We're writing about a black box industry which no one really understands, which controls vast swathes of our economy and our life without many people knowing actually how it works. It's connected to every single thing that we have in this country. It's really the bedrock of a lot of things, in a very shady way. And we thought, look, it's an opportunity to write about that kind of stuff. Like we like writing about politics. We like writing about the media. We like writing about class a lot. And like ultimately, we presented industry as an exploration. On Pierpoint as a place which tells its employees that it's a true meritocracy, but then we have all these kind of marginalized people who come into it who realize that they have very, very different ceilings, and that actually it's not a meritocracy at all, and actually you're kind of hamstrung by your background, your class, your race, and it's about striving beyond that stuff. So like, you can't write that stuff without thinking about all those themes.
But I always think with theme as well, when we write, it's like, if you look at it head on, what you're writing about, it's a really not very good answer. But if you look at head on, it suddenly becomes very on the nose. And it's kind of like, I feel like what we try and do is, we'll never say an episode is about this, but an episode might be about 10 things. And then a good example is like, we don't have like a set rubric or like a pattern of going about it. Which is not very helpful in terms of our process. But like a good example is episode 4, there's a big moment for Rishi at the end of the episode where he does something to a cricket pavilion. And that was in the breaking of the episode, that came really early. But we were thinking, what is that anger about? Like what is he sublimating? What is that rage about? And that led to questions about his own sense of identity. So, he's a British Asian man who's made a lot of money, but he's in this kind of old white countryside world. what is the fact that it's a cricket pavilion? What does that say about his relationship to England? Second, third generation immigrant. So it was that. It was the idea of the image or the plot point, kind of leading to the theme rather than the other way around. If that makes sense. And then when we overwrite stuff, we'll rewrite scenes and we'll be like, actually, maybe we can just hit this a little bit harder in dialogue so nobody can miss it. If that makes sense, especially people reading it for the first time and giving notes on it.
But it hasn't been the same season by season necessarily, has it? Because I think that one of the reasons that Mickey and Konrad can take, and the show can take the audience by the hand in the way you talk about, is because in season 1, they're actually all conversations were dictated by character. So out of character came theme, out of character came narrative. And the fact that in season 1, the stakes were the salad run, or whether or not you were going to be put on whoever's desk, or who was going to be there at the end of this period of time, were things which were highly relatable to an audience. I think that was one of the things that I thought was standout about that first season of Industry, is you did not have to work in finance to understand what Mickey and Konrad's characters were going through. And I always have this theory that part of the great strength of Game of Thrones is that the audience grew up with those Stark kids. If you look back to season 1 and look where they ended up and the audience went on that journey, we've only done 3 seasons, but we've done 3 seasons over 8 years, or 6 years for the audience, 8 years for us. And so the audience has grown up with them. And so it means that in between seasons, Mickey and Konrad move those characters on more than you would normally get between a season 1 and season 2, and they can move them on that way because there's been like a 2-year gap, hopefully a smaller one between the next one, but for all sorts of life reasons that's happened. And I think that while loads of conversation about, okay, what is the theme of the season, and therefore, how are we going to do this, that, and the other, ultimately it is the strength of those characters that they have built together with the artists that I think mean that they can do all of that complicated stuff that you talk about.
Being born out of the interactions between the characters as well, because season 1 we were like, okay, well, 2 young graduates from different desks are talking to one another. But then when you actually write the scene and you have, you take into account like the different backgrounds between the characters, there's like, every scene is imbued with a kind of like tension between class, or tension between background or race, and there's constant unsaid tension in every single scene in Industry.
Totally. And so it's all about your points, about power. Yeah. About who has it in the scene and who doesn't.
Who wants it. And so yeah, I mean, it's a really long-winded way of saying like we find the theme afterwards.
Yeah.
I mean, they're very rarely. I'm trying to think of any occasions where we thought this is an episode where we're going to write about this.
Very rare. I mean, never.
But they're both really great being collaborative about it. So especially with episode 4, they sent me the episode and said, "Listen, Sagar." Thanks, guys.
You did a really good job.
They sent me the episode and said, listen, we obviously don't come from a South Asian, British Asian background, so if there's anything that doesn't fit culturally, it doesn't sit right culturally, let's have a conversation about it. And those types of conversations can make all the difference just to elevate it, that 10% if it needs it. So
you've all mentioned episode 4 quite a lot, so I feel like we should take a look at episode 4. So this is episode 4 of season 3, and this is focused on Rishi. Again, we're not going to spoil anything, but Rishi is flying quite close to the sun in season 3, and kind of hubris. What comes after hubris? We shall see.
Almost feel sorry for him.
Can I just say, you're so good. You're so good.
I, without being too self-deprecating, I found that really difficult day to shoot. It wasn't an easy scene to shoot, and there's so much going on. I really.
Why was that?
I don't know,
because someone had punched you in the face.
Yeah.
That might have played a part. I don't know, because you're sitting in front of your desk and your peers, and you're sort of just trying to have that conversation with them about, like, am I the problem? Surely not, like, sort of thing. And it's just, I just found it really difficult. I just remember walking away going, I don't think I nailed that. I don't think I got it. And it's okay.
We saved you in the edit.
Yeah, you saved it in the edit.
What I love about...
Did you scuttle down the stairs?
Yeah,
I scuttled down the stairs.
like a crab.
Nailed it, yeah.
What I love about Rishi is how confident he is usually, and just so much kind of his sort of like brash machismo, and it's interesting to see there that sort of flipped on its head a little bit. And one of the things I also love about the show is that you have people like Rishi, like Eric, people that you would not expect to see at the heart of this drama. And it's so interesting thinking about these sort of marginalised characters sort of right and front and centre. And is that something you're sort of thinking about or conscious about with Rishi?
Yes and no. I think you can't let yourself overthink it, otherwise you'll just complicate it for yourself. As a South Asian man, it's difficult to also not be aware of it. You don't get to see characters like me on TV anymore, front-footed, boisterous, alpha. So when that opportunity came to me where I could run with it a bit more, especially going into season 2, I was going to grab it with both arms and run with it as best I can. And then when episode 4 came along, and it's really fleshed out, then you're kind of just like, head down, let's get to work.
And what sorts of creative conversations are you three sort of having ahead of an episode, like episode 4? Are you sort of talking about your sort of character's journey? Are you talking about where you want it to go tonally? Are you using kind of references? How do you sort of kind of share creatively so that you're on the same page?
Something we touched on before about like the cultural side of it, just trying to make sure we hit those beats correctly if there's anything that wasn't quite right. But other than that, I think it was just having conversations about emotional beats when you're shooting it, because inevitably you shoot out of sequence, and there's a big journey that Rishi goes on in episode 4 emotionally. So it's just trying to make sure from a directorial perspective to kind of make sure you're hitting those beats in the right way when you're shooting. So for example, there's a scene where I'm in a casino where I'm really down and out, and that was like day 1. So it's trying to find where we are on the map for that, to then go back, because we do go back at the top of the scene, top of the episode, like a couple of weeks later.
We've got some audience questions, which I am going to ask. So someone wants to get straight into the sex and drugs, and they want to know how you persuaded Kit Harrington to take his clothes off so much.
Oh, he loves that.
He loves it, yeah.
That didn't take much persuading.
He's very proud of it.
Yeah, that's a good, yeah.
Rightly so.
And rightly
Rightly
so,
so.
exactly. He actually
As
asked.
well.
He was like, can I get naked? You're like, fine.
This person also wants to know what it is that people are snorting when they're.
It's like
I'm
milk.
assuming
It's
it's
like
not
milk
Coke.
powder.
cocaine.
Yeah.
Oh, it's
Okay.
It's milk powder, yeah.
It's milk powder, and then someone runs on with a tissue straight after you, trying to blow out as much as you can.
Declan wants to know how it feels like to have the best show on air right now.
Oh, Declan.
I wouldn't know. It's not on air.
We'll have to ask someone
October the
Ask Chris Thora.
Who are the core viewers of the show, do you think? Especially do young people in the finance world like it?
They do. They've actually come around to it quite a lot. I think a lot of it was...
There'd be quite a small perception of the piece of the audience.
That's a
though,
small,
wouldn't it?
yeah, it's a small but vocal
It's
part of the
basically your
audience.
friends.
Yeah, it's like our friends
let's
that
be
work in
clear.
finance. They came round to it. I think there was a bit of, oh, this is our thing, and I can't believe that someone's actually putting this on screen. And yeah, they love it now. I think they all think it's about them, which to a certain extent it is.
The audience skews young, and I'm very intensely into the show.
I can imagine. And you've all talked a little bit about, the show being a sort of incubator for talent for you guys and for the cast as well. But to what extent are you sort of thinking about that in terms of people that you're bringing on in the writers' room? I know Bad Wolf have just launched this new writers' scheme, which obviously isn't directly linked to the show, but you're sort of thinking about bringing on new talents.
So the writer scheme that Bad Wolf has launched, it's actually a piece of synchronicity, really, that season 3 is going out in the US, it's about to go out here, and that it is such a great story for new writers over a short period of time to have really conquered television in the way that Mickey and Konrad have. Won't be everyone's journey, but I think it's very inspiring to know it is a possible journey. And we're at Bad Wolf, we're really committed to doing that, not just with writers, but with other areas as well. I think there is something that's interesting, though, on the first, actually you can talk about this while I cough, but on the first season of Industry, all the heads of department were new. And that was quite difficult, wasn't it?
That was quite. That was
Yeah.
tough.
Do you mind taking over?
And
No, of course. Everyone was new.
Everyone was their first. It was the first for a lot of people. It was the first. HODs was the first time they'd actually become HODs. They'd obviously worked their way up, but everyone was kind of new.
Yeah, one of our sound guys said to us that like, people stopped asking Mickey and Konrad questions because don't ask Mickey and Konrad anything because they don't know what they're doing. Which is not what you want to hear about us saying.
The truth was, the one person for whose rodeo this was not the first was me, and I had the great idea of thinking, do you know what? Everyone will be new. And it was literally like, I was kind of like, oh my God, what have I done? Because there wasn't anyone,
There wasn't
apart
a
from
ballast.
me,
Yeah.
to kind of like lean on to think, all right, and that, you know, it is that thing that you just never stop learning. It doesn't matter how many times you do it. You know, I made so many mistakes in that first season of it. I mean, that was a mistake. You know, you don't need to have everyone new all of the time, but you do need to make sure that you are, if you're a company that makes as much as Bad Wolf has, you can always ensure that there is a department somewhere where someone is getting their first time in a job, but you don't have to do it all places. All at once.
We get enormous pleasure and pride out of the fact that, you know, the 4 actors we cast in season 1, you look at their careers now after the show and part of the show, they've all gone to, you know, huge things. The nature of the show is it's organic for us to constantly have a new influx of graduates. People like Miriam and Irfan in season 3 have just, you know, they have huge shoes to fill in. I remember Miriam's first day on set. I was thinking, God, she's literally stood on this trading floor. She's fresh out of drama school. She absolutely crushed it. And she's one of the best things about the season. And like, if we get to keep doing that, it would be blooding people fresh out of drama school and then watching them fly is one of the, you know.
There's writers' room as well, to your earlier point. I mean, like, it's an incredibly diverse writers' room of a lot of people who have never been in a writers' room before, which was mine and Konrad's experience when we first ran one. So we thought, like, you know.
Not that you'd have known.
No, you didn't.
You did know.
But yeah, we had like very diverse voices in there. Like, you know, everyone was coming from a totally different perspective. The show obviously is a very diverse show, so it feels like it's reflective of that. I mean, anyone that feels like interesting in any way. Like, one of our really good writers in season 3 was a guy called Azam Mahmood, and he actually LinkedIn me about I never check my LinkedIn anymore. I occasionally go on. It's just loads of people being like, "Can I have a job?" Like, "Can I have a job?" Or I got into banking because of this show, which is still very proud of that. But then the subject was queer Pakistani ex-Goldman Sachs, and I was like, cool. So I spoke to him for about a year, and I was sort of like mentoring him. And then we got to this writers' room, and he was like, "Oh, do you think I could maybe shadow you?" And I was like, "Actually, you know what? Like, maybe you should just come in."
Yeah.
And he was excellent.
Exceptional writer.
Yeah.
Can I just go back to the writers' programme, because I think I coughed.
Oh,
I
yes,
won't do that.
absolutely.
I don't think I'll start coughing again. But part of the reason, it is synchronicity of timing, that it's there when, you know, Mickey and Konrad's inspiring story is out there. It's also timing because it's 10 years since Bad Wolf started, and actually you could argue, well, it took me long enough to do it, but we have been using new writers in all sorts of other ways. But the real reason to do it, and to make a noise about it, because you can do it quite quietly, and it is for Welsh talent, so you can do it quite quietly and specifically, but the reason to make a noise about it is because I feel it is really important at this moment in time to do a call to arms to ensure that when the industry is contracting a little bit, and it is going through a crazy difficult time at the moment, that we remind the commissioners and the broadcasters that new writing doesn't have to be marginalised. It can occupy the mainstream. You can just give people a chance, and here's how to do it. Mickey and Konrad started as writers, and then they became really good EPs, and then they became really good directors as well. And this is what we should be doing to keep the ecology of our industry fresh and percolated.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And one thing I also wanted to ask you about was, you know, thinking about this kind of progression and growth as you guys are directing for the first time on this. Can you tell us a little bit about how you do that? Like, you direct together, right? Like, do each of you take a different role? Do you sort of...
It's another very unsatisfactory answer.
One
Like
says
when people ask
action,
us how we
one
write.
says
Yeah,
action,
and
and the other says cut.
The reason I think we were very good friends before we were colleagues, so there's a kind of shared history, which means that I think it's very annoying for people to hang out with us and be in writers' rooms with us, because we have a kind of bit of a telekinetic thing, and often like he'll go halfway through a thought and then not finish it, and I'll have read it, and people will be like, "What did he just say?" And so it's a weird symbiotic thing, but it kind of means that we don't like we EP the show, we do a lot of stuff on it, but we never delegate to each other, so we never talk about who's going to do what when. So there'll be a day on set, like some days Mickey will be talking to the actors and I'll just be by the monitor, or I'll be off, and one of us will be off producing the show while someone directs a couple of scenes, but there's not a big sort of holistic conversation about it. We'll often just, we'll watch a take, Mickey has an idea, I have an idea, we'll talk about it together, like a little huddle, and then we'll go over and talk to the actors, but there's not a big conversation.
We never argue over the creative, we never argue in general, but we never argue about the creative as well. So and also, sometimes it's a very pressurized environment, we have these, as Sagar said, but sometimes we're doing many pages in a day, we don't have much time. Me and Konrad know exactly how we're going to edit the show as well, so there's times where after 2 takes, we have it. We don't need to go and give the actors. We can move on. Sometimes the actors find that very frustrating because they've been waiting for days to be able to do this performance. But it's like as Konrad said, there's never a conversation about it. It's just like we just go and do it.
Also, it's the thing. I mean, it is very stressful, and we directed the last block, so we were really up against it, and we were editing it and cutting it at the same time, producing it. But also, I think you can speak more to this than I can because it's not. I'm complimenting us, but. There's a sense of fun all the time, right? It's not like neither of us think we're splitting the atom. Like the idea of it being a place where people don't want to come to work, or that it feels stressful, or that it feels antagonistic. Like the whole thing is fantastic and really, really fun and joyful. And we try and communicate that as much as we can as we're doing it. But from a practical point of view, directing our own writing was actually very, very helpful because in a way, directing TV is a really quite difficult thing because we hire people, then we kind of, we want them to be artistic, but we're also kind of making sure that we can answer to HBO because ultimately they're the people who are going to be giving us notes. So we're kind of perched on their shoulder a little bit. And there would always be a thing, especially if we're on set, where the actor looks at the director and then kind of looks at us because they want approval from both. Whereas cutting out that sort of middleman, to use a pretty blunt phrase, made the process much quicker. So we were making our days much quicker. We were getting what we needed much quicker.
They have this amazing combination of attention to detail whilst also leaving you free, which is great for an actor because you want that attention to detail just to kind of tweak a few things here and there. But then you have the freedom to just kind of run with things. And again, just going back to when I said about the freedom to fail, and they allow that. And it's difficult. I think maybe the guest actors would have a different perspective on this. I think for us who've been on it for 3 years, there is a kind of confidence in you know what you're doing, just crack on and we'll just tweak it a bit.
Yeah, you really feel that confidence in the show. Certainly season 2, season 3, it's really special. I'm afraid that's all we've got time for, but please join me in saying thank you so much to Jane, Mickey, Konrad, Sagar.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us so much.